About drugs, it's very important to kind of clarify because it kind of like sounds like this dirty word, right? You know what I'm saying? But drugs in of themselves are things that people use to help medicate themselves. It's when it's being overused or it's being abused or even being weaponized against people, right? Is the nature of the conversation we want to have. And then alcohol, again, is another word that could be easily, maybe on the other end, depending on your experiences, it can be something that could be a dirty word or it can be something that could be a happy word. I think we have to level set, right? You know what I'm saying? That for some people, it is a very dirty word because they're experiencing a whole lot of social insecurity, a lot of violence, a lot of mental health problems being exacerbated because of the presence of alcohol. And for others in their environment, right, there's not those type of problems. So alcohol is something that's more recreational, but depending on how normalized it becomes, that recreational can become something that is abusive for themselves and even for their families, right? So just want to be clear about the terms, right? Making sure that we don't like demonize any particular term, right? Same thing with mental health, right? Mental health is a thing, some people are born with challenges when it comes to how their brain operates, right? And how they're actually navigating, right, life on a day-to-day basis, right? And then some people have experienced things that's completely out of control for them, right? So again, it's not a dirty word either, right? It's a word that we should be thinking about in a very healthy way, right? So when I say, you know, the web, right, I want to talk about the web of darkness between drugs, alcohol, and mental health, right? And then say, hey, family is this thing that's being victimized, right? No, we want to just understand those, right, and set the standard for what we're talking about over the actual time that we're here. And what we know is that, so even inside mental health, for those that have that background, there's a thing that we refer to as dual diagnosis. Right? So the dual diagnosis is they have mental health and they have substance use disorder, right? Those two things. But what's often missed inside of clinical environments is that there's an overwhelming, right, relationship with social determinants, right? People are being, their treatment, if they're getting treatment, is being compromised on a daily because of the actual environments that they're in. Same thing with schools, right? You can push education as much as you need to. You can be as creative as you like within an educational setting, but if you're completely disconnected from what's going on in the homes, or what, let's just say this, what the children may be experiencing inside the homes, right? Then it's going to inhibit your capacity to be effective, right? So what we want to kind of do is place the emphasis on, right, how much are we thinking about what the young people are experiencing in their homes and their communities before they enter into the actual classroom, before they enter into the school setting, and in which ways can the school setting, although it has its limits, it can't go into the home, right? It shouldn't be in the home much, right? The home should be meeting the school, right? So how do you get the home to the school? Because if the school goes into the home, there's different things going on there, right? And their cultural capacity and even their human capacity may require them to cause more harm based on how they're understanding what they're seeing, right? This is how it is. Your professional training is going to tell you red flag, and in actuality, it's not that big of a red flag, right? It's a whole lot of other red flags, right? We should be worried about. Maybe that thing right there is not the red flag. So we don't want to have like them into the homes, but we have to find a way to get the actual parents and the families to meet the school, right, at a middle point. Because there's a huge disconnect, right? And our goal and interest is the young people, right? And the school has minimum capacity to address the social determinants in the home. So where's the actual missing piece of the web? Community. Right? And it's a challenging thing because money is connected to how do you get community involved, right? So what we're gonna be trying to talk about over the actual course of the next few days, right, next 2 days, is how it's not that big of an obstacle. It really just takes some conversations happening, some collaborations when it comes to actual the type of strategies and actually connecting deliverables to certain strategies, right? And having, they have this dirty word, I use that dirty word thing, right? They call it duplication services, right? I hate that term, right? Because a duplication of services tells me that when you say that, you're saying that someone shouldn't be doing what someone else is doing, but when someone is doing this, they can't solve all the problems out there. It's a lot of things being missed, right? The question is, right, how can we articulate what you're doing, right, and add to it some of the actual needs that's not being addressed, right? How can we actually diversify the outcome, right? That's not being talked about in order to actually optimize the use of our resources, right? We're thinking like streamline. So what I want to kind of do, I'm going to share a video, right? And then, you know, most people here are panelists right now, so we're going to probably just come and keep it recorded and talk as people come in or whatnot, just to have it available. But we're going to have a conversation no matter what, right? And so I want to have this conversation. I want to put it in the universe. I want to have it recorded. And I want to be able to share it. So if we can play this video real quick and talk with...
You want to see the design, it's hard to see the red, but the red goes from ages like 7 to 20. We followed up the youngest cohort, and we followed the oldest cohort from like age 12 or 13 to 25. The middle cohort we had to stop funding stop following due to funding restraints, but somebody just picked them up in their 20s, and that should be an interesting study. So we're continuing, actually there's a grant pending right now to follow up these boys 5 years later. And so with this data, first I looked at the developmental associations in 2 different papers, one looking at the youngest cohort and one looking at the oldest cohort. And I basically found that the associations between substance use and violence were reciprocal over time. That meant that alcohol or marijuana use in 1 year predicted aggression or violent offending in the next year, even controlling for violent offending in this year. But similarly, violent offending in 1 year predicted alcohol and drug use in the next year. I found that in the younger cohort, the relationship was stronger for marijuana and violence, and in the older cohort, it was stronger for alcohol and violence. And it seemed to reflect historical differences in popularity of drugs at various times during the 90s. We also found in the youngest cohort, when we controlled for common risk factors, specifically race and hard drug use, the association between marijuana and violence was no longer significant, which indicated that marijuana use and violence are probably related because they share a similar set of causes. But what's really exciting for me is that the PYS data let me look at the acute associations between all different kinds of crime and all kinds of drug use. And what made this special is because previous studies that have been looked at the acute effects have used predominantly samples of adjudicated adolescents or people in jail, and these findings have not been generalizable to community samples. And in fact, it's been speculated that some kids may lie about their alcohol or drug involvement when they commit crimes to hopefully give themselves an excuse or for committing the crime, or it's even possible that those who use drugs are the ones more likely to get caught. So we weren't sure how to interpret these data from adjudicated delinquents, so the best way to study this, I felt, was to look at community samples. But the problem with community samples is, as I alluded to before, you often have very low rates of crime, so it's difficult to do these studies. But luckily, in the Pittsburgh sample, we had a nice variability in crime rates. And also, most of the studies have only looked at a few types of crime and have not controlled for drug use. Obviously, if you don't control for drug use, you can't look at drug-related violence. So I was able to do all that. And finally, nobody had really attempted to explain the mechanisms or why there is this association between drug use and violence. So I tried to look at 3 different possible mechanisms. The first would be the psychopharmacological effects of drugs that I alluded to before. That is that impairment, specifically from alcohol, would lower inhibitions or increase the risks for kids acting violently because of lack of awareness of risks, lack of concern about consequences, and all of those things. Another possibility is that delinquency or offending is a peer group activity, and so is drug use. And it might be that kids sort of get together with their friends and they get high together, and then they sort of motivate each other to commit crimes. And the third possible mechanism might be individual differences. That being that individuals who may be high on certain temperament characteristics, for example, impulsivity, might be more likely to commit crimes or at least violent crimes under the influence. So I basically we asked 5 questions in this study. Is there a difference in the types of crimes that are committed under the influence of alcohol and drugs? Is there a difference between alcohol and marijuana use in whether kids commit crimes under the influence of drugs? Is there a relationship between committing crimes with other people and committing crimes under the influence? What is the effect of drug involvement on committing crimes under the influence? And finally, are these relationships moderated by individual impulsivity or pure delinquency? We had 19 different types of offenses that the kids self-reported on, and I divided them into general theft, crimes against persons, and then miscellaneous crimes. And we also had, in order to assess committing crimes under the influence, we asked kids, for each crime they committed, we asked them, when you committed your most serious offense, were you under the influence of alcohol or drugs? Now that was a problem for me because it was alcohol or drugs, and I couldn't separate the two types of substances. But there were two questions in the data set that asked about getting into fights and getting in trouble with the police while using alcohol and while using marijuana, and these were asked separately for users of alcohol and users of marijuana. Also, the question that asked about committing crimes under the influence asked them, when you committed the most serious crime, did you commit it with other people or did you commit it alone? So we were able to see which crimes were committed with other people. And we also measured drug use, impulsivity, and pure delinquency. This slide shows you the percent of boys committing each different type of offense under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Now keep in mind that this slide is based on the number who commit the crime, which could be as little as 14 subjects for forging checks to as many as 220 boys for strong-arming. And actually what you see here is strong-arming is the offense committed most often under the influence of alcohol and drugs. About 44% of the boys committed their most serious strong-arming offense under the influence of alcohol and drugs. And if you look at the highest ones, you see they are strong-arming, attacking people, throwing things at people. I can't see them all from here. But all of the ones that have the highest rates of being under the influence are also the ones that we consider to be aggressive delinquency. If you look on the right side of the slide, you see that nobody forged a check under the influence. And in fact, the lowest levels of committing crimes under the influence were the white-collar crimes. Just to summarize that, this slide presents a summary of it, dividing those into crimes against persons and theft. And what you see here, first of all, in green, it's the ever. So you see 61% of the sample ever committed a person crime, and 32% ever committed a theft crime. So actually twice as many kids in this sample committed violent offenses than committed property offenses. But of those who commit each of those crimes, 40% committed a violent crime under the influence of alcohol and drugs, where only 23% committed a theft crime. Again, supporting, in answer to our first question, violent crimes are more often committed under the influence of alcohol and drugs than are property crimes. But this didn't tell me whether, it was alcohol or drugs. So we looked at the fighting and getting in trouble with the police separately for alcohol and drugs.
There's not much left on that. I want to make the connection. First, I appreciate the fact that she produced statistics, and data. But the connection I want to actually kind of extract from that for us to kind of build off of is that, so they actually measure individual crimes that was committed by themselves, right? But then she identified that there's also this peer dynamic, right? What happens in groups. And when you bring the reality of mental health and family, right, into the equation of this conversation, you're talking about, right, oftentimes people that are dealing with trying to escape environments where there's toxicity or other forms of unhealthy behaviors inside of it, even for mental health. Right? Mental health itself is a form of actual, a thing that we want to get away from, right? Even if it's not like, how you want to say, actual abuse, right? Just seeing a family member or a sibling or a mother or father right, be in a deep state of depression, right, can actually have an impact on you, where you feel like, I want to not be in this space, I need to get out of it. I'm not getting the connection that I'm in need of. I'm not getting the interaction. I'm not getting my needs met. I'm always catering to someone else, right? The environment is dark. So you leave that environment, or you're no longer in that environment, and what are you seeking? You have two choices. You're going to be by yourself, right? Or you're going to find a peer group, right? And that's where I want to kind of focus our energy in some capacities, right? I want everyone to kind of bring what they would like to bring, but I want to bring back this dynamic of oftentimes when you're dealing with young people and people in general, and they're dealing with this uneasiness within themselves, right? Emotionally and psychologically, they have a choice, right? To isolate, which can be a challenge, right? It can also be healing, but oftentimes it's more of a challenge, right? Or they have a choice to go find peers that they feel like can help solve that need. And oftentimes they don't find the right type of peers, right? Depending on what environment they're in. And that becomes a whole nother dynamic, right? Where violence, crime, and other type of things, because hurt people, right? But also people, they trauma bond, right? You'd be surprised, a lot of the gang activity, a lot of the actual street activity is trauma bond happening out there. So just kind of making that connection to, yes, there's alcohol, yes, there's drugs, yes, we know these things contribute to it, right? And there's also this need of, I'm not feeling easy inside. Like something's wrong with how I'm feeling, and I need something more. How do I get that, right? And one of the things I want to put out there as I welcome you guys up is that I believe, right, in addition to education, I believe one of the most healing places should be in schools. There's a huge opportunity inside of our schools, and I think we have to relearn how to make it a healing space, right? Because it's not in all schools, right? But it can be. And I still think, even with the current state that it may be in, I still think it offers more healing than almost any other place. Even in the state that it's in, right? There's still these adults, these connectors, there's these anchors that you can find in that space if you're looking for it, right? And I think that's important for us to know that, right? So I'm gonna welcome our guest up, and we're gonna hopefully have a conversation here. So again, this is being recorded, so feel comfortable. We need another chair. It's 4. I'm just gonna get off screen. It's okay. I can get off screen. Huh? Oh. Thank you. Perfect. All right, so that's perfect for me. I can actually sit over here in my rocking chair. I see that won't be on stage. I'm on stage, right? They see me all the time and whatnot. See you guys, right? So just real quick, I'm just going to actually recite our names and welcome Mr. Tim Merrick, Mrs. Danelia Williams, Rose Saraiva, that name, Saraiva. It's not Saraiva, and Miss Angie Canny. And what I'm going to ask you guys to do real quick for our audience is to just give a brief introduction of yourself, right, as a person, right? Who are you, right? You know what I'm saying? Personally, and then professionally, right? How are you situated, right, professionally? And then why would the subject, within those two things, personal and professional, why is this subject important to you, right? You know what I'm saying? I'll give each one of you guys a chance to share that, and then I got a couple questions to hopefully have a lively conversation, okay? So let's go from Ms. Williams.
All right. I'm Daniela Williams, and I am the Executive Director and Staff Psychotherapist at the Community Counseling Center. This is important to me because I grew up in Wilmington. I'm one of the few that you're going to find, luckily, from Wilmington. And I witnessed these changes that have occurred within Wilmington, within the school system. And now as a parent, I'm also witnessing exactly what you're talking about, how mental health, families, the lack of this connection, how it's impacting kids, and also how it's impacting adults. I'm passionate about this because I want to reframe this that, hey, it's not actually the kids. They're new to this world. They're learning from us. And so if there are parents who are struggling because their parents were struggling, this is a generational thing. We have to find a place where we can disrupt this generational situation.
Yes.
And there are systems that have been in place that are continuing to disrupt this and make it hard for kids to grow, and we keep blaming the kids. You're not acting right, you're not doing the right thing. Well, you haven't made it easy, nor have you created spaces where kids can be okay and regulated because you're dysregulated. And so that's my cause, and that's what I stand on.
That's awesome. Thank you. Wilmingtonian natives. Excellent. Tim.
My name is Dr. Tim Merrick. I am a retired chiropractor. I am sitting on the school board here in New Hanover County. I got into the school board because my family was steeped in education. You know, my mom was my teacher, my father was my principal, my grandfather testified at Brown v. Board of Education.
Oh, wow.
And so that passion fit for me to step into this service as a board member. But as far as me personally going, this is really important work for me. I grew up not knowing that I was autistic, and which means I don't know how to interact well socially, which means I don't understand the nuances that are happening around me, and that means I'm different, and that means I'm treated as different. So I'm pretty good at masking now. I know how to get along pretty darn well, but it took a lot of years to do that. In the meantime, I got bullied a lot, I got made fun of a lot, and so I really have a heart for these kids who, you know, like Daniela said, they're new to the world.
Yeah.
And this is not them. If we look at family systems, we see what the child is expressing as a matter of the family dynamic. And if we broaden that even more, we look at the family dynamic as part of an expression of the community. And so these kids got a lot working against them. And so when we talk about drugs, and I really appreciate the way you level set for us, you know, when I was a teenager, I certainly reached for that thing that could help me regulate, or I thought it could. It wasn't the best choice, but it was what helped me get through.
Yes.
And so, you know, luckily I didn't get arrested. Luckily I wasn't involved in crime. I do have a certain amount of privilege as a white male. But yeah, I'm here because this is important work.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Angie?
So I'm Angie Caney. I'm also a Wilmington native, so I've lived here my whole life. So yeah, this is definitely a community that I love. And so I'm also a social worker. That's my background. But with that social work degree, I've focused really heavily on working with kids who are abused and neglected. So I've spent a lot of time working with victims of sexual assault in the school system. It's a kind of a big thing here, that we have a large population there. And as Abdullah was saying, you know, like violence comes, there's multiple forms of violence. And so I get to work every day in the school system and see those. And so here, I work at Dakota House, and so here we practice the community health worker, violence prevention professionals, like the model. And I strongly believe that what is missing in our schools is that connectivity. I teach from conscious discipline, which is very in sync with our CPRV model. And so it's very relationship based and not fear based. It's very proactive and not reactive. And so I've been in all 42 traditional schools in this county, and I think you have to look individually at them, because some schools really have fostered that connectivity and they really practice it, and you can tell, not just from, you know, the numbers on data, but you can tell, like, when you interact with their kids and their families and their staff stays as well. So anyway, that I'm really passionate about that. I'm a mom, and so my son just graduated from the school system here and spent his whole life here as well. And so I've got to see how that affects the kids that I work with, and also my own son. And so I agree with what everybody has said, that I think that nurturing those relationships and fostering that trust in the community, like you were saying earlier, would help there tremendously. And so that's something that I want to see happen.
Excellent. Thank you, Angie. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Rose?
Hi, I'm Rose Saraiva. I go to UNCW for social work. I graduate next semester. and I'm interning at DC Burger right now as an intern school social worker. And what brought me to social work is the reason why I'm passionate about what we're talking about today. I'm from Salem, Massachusetts, and I was from an area where there was violence in my neighborhood. And the vices that were around to cope were not healthy vices. We had bars instead of community help. We had convenience stores of substance rather than community care. My brother struggled with addiction my whole life. So I watched the way that it impacted my family. I revived him the first time when I was in 6th grade, and I went to school the next day. And going to school and carrying that, and looking around and thinking that you are completely alone in this makes it really difficult to learn. And I want to be the face in a school to remind someone that they're not alone, and to bring those connections up to allow people to connect on the hard topics.
Yes.
Because the hard topics that we don't talk about are the topics that we need to talk about the most, because those are what are hurting us the most inside.
That's excellent, Rose. Thank you for sharing that, all you guys. Okay, that was amazing. So what I would like to get out of this panel and your expertise and your personal experience, which all you guys bring that to the table, and that's excellent, it's amazing, is how do we support schools to become that healing space for young people? They can't, it's not their job, right? Let's be clear, right? Their job is to educate, right? But you can't educate, right, without a soul or a human being comfortable and feeling safe, right, in that environment, right? So that the brain can thrive at its highest potential, right? So at some level, it's a prerequisite, right? Saying for proper development and education. At the same time, we know the professionals there, not all of them, have been trained or should be given the burden, right, of being that. Because people have been trained to do very specific things. But we have social workers in the schools, we have nurses in the schools, we have some professionals, and we have some teachers that's been trauma informed, right, that have some training, right? But reality is that the school has to become a culture of healing, right? And each one of you guys bring very unique, right, perspectives. From working in as an intern, social work, from actually doing the advocacy of the work, from administrative and personal experience, and from the clinical mental health understanding, right? What would it take, like in our schools today? Again, it's not like I wouldn't actually come with like a utopia, but with some very practical steps, from your opinion, of things that would be needed, right, for our schools to become more aware that our children are dealing with a whole lot, and yes, we can't help them address everything, right, but we do need to be more concerned, right, and we need to pivot in prioritizing the fact that they come into our school with problems, right? How do we respond to that in an organic but strategic way? And anyone to share?
I'll go first. It may sound, what I'm going to say may sound a little, I'm pushing back. Not on you, but
No, you're good.
This whole situation. I want to say, let's not forget, we had it really good in the 80s and 90s. Because what we are experiencing now is intentional and formative because of someone's agenda.
Okay.
I don't know whose agenda, I mean, I could guess, but someone's agenda. When I grew up, and I grew up, where are we? 1 block down, 2 blocks down 10th Street.
Okay.
Jervin, it's torn down.
Yeah.
I grew up in what someone would call the worst of the worst, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I didn't even know I was poor until I got to college. 18 years later, I did not know that I didn't have what everyone else had. Because community, and you went back to that. The school that I went to, they bused us to Bellamy, even though Gregory was there, Hal was there, they bused us to Bellamy intentionally. And I know that sometimes we feel as though busing is, we shouldn't have to do that, but we have to be honest, we live in Wilmington, and we're congregated in small areas because of, again, someone's agenda. And we cannot have this conversation without it being about race and economics. And so when we were bused to Bellamy, they realized that the population they served. My mom was a single mom. My dad was in my life, but he was in DC. I knew who my dad was, but he was in DC. My mom was raising me and my 2 brothers and sisters alone in the German community. Not the new one, the old one that's torn down. But that school sent a bus every quarter or whenever they had a PTA meeting, a bus was sent from Bellamy to pick up every parent to take them to the PTA meeting. There was food available, there was childcare available. We went on that bus with our parents to the PTA meetings. That was intentional. Someone thought of that. Let's get the parents here. Let's help. When my mom, who did not drive my entire life, was the #1 volunteer every year at Bellamy throughout my entire career at school, she didn't drive. She didn't know how to drive. She was scared to drive. But she was the #1 volunteer. Someone, I don't know how, I'm assuming someone from the school went to pick her up because no one else in our community drove either. And someone picked her up. She showed up at every class. She was a teacher. She wasn't even a teacher assistant, but she was in the classroom because she wanted to be. There was a choice. She felt welcome. There wasn't a lot of rules and red tape. And yes, there's a need for safety, but who says that we need all of these barriers to stop parents from interacting in their classroom? I tried to go multiple times last year to my kids' classroom. I'm off on Fridays. I will come in and host a reading group. Not one time was I allowed to come in. Not one time I allowed to come in to sit and just help other students. My kid is fine. I'm going to teach him. I'm also an educator. I taught for years. I know that if my kid, who is okay, is in a classroom with other kids who are not regulated, my kid can't learn. And he did. He hated the school. I had to move him out of the school because these kids weren't regulated. So how do we create this space again? We do what we did before. We create community. And you can't progress without community. The things that I do at the Community Counseling Center, I try to create community because that's where we heal. And if you don't have that healing, Dr. Merrick said it best. He said, look at the systems. What's going on in home is going to reflect what's going on with what goes on with the individual reflects what's going on in home. What's going on in home reflects the community. Our community is segregated. It's just, there's a dissection in our entire community. And everyone's playing out their egos, and the children they're taking on the brunt of it. So if we want to fix what's happening, we have to fix our community. And we have to acknowledge, like, there's intentional things being put in place that are harming people. The fact that people are homeless and they are making the most money they've ever made doesn't make sense. The fact that we can put in rules or regulations that say, hey, you can't raise your rent certain amount, we can put them memorials, and they aren't making sense. So kids don't know that home, when they're going to come home, if they're going to be home, they don't know if they're going to be evicted, they don't know if the lights are going to be on, they don't know if they're going to have food. And you want them to go to school regulated, and the teachers aren't regulated because they have to pay so much for their health insurance and they can't deal with their own stuff. Like, we gotta fix it. And the only way to fix it is to acknowledge that our community is dysfunctional and it's intentional.
Yeah, I agree. And I would add that, and I also want to hear from everybody else as well too. I want to say that, so what's clear is that Wilmington, almost like a 100-year anniversary to 1898, established an agenda called 2020. We're past the 20 years, right? It's moved into another 30-year vision, which is expedited inside of Brunswick County with Leland. This is an economic hub. Like, economic is the demand of the day. It's the fastest growing, city inside the state of North Carolina, recently stated. It was recognized as one of the actual fastest, or #1 startup for businesses, one of the fastest growing ports, rapidly growing airport, international airport, right? 2 of the fastest growing counties next to it, right? The agenda for economic development is overwhelmingly established and thriving, right? So a lot of what you mentioned is this collateral damage from that, right? What I would add to what you're saying in terms of what's been intentional, I think we as community have to figure out how to, unfortunately, ride the wave of the economics tap into the economics because it's here, it's not going anywhere, it's becoming more of a monster, right? And figure out how to plug into it and then redirect our priorities from those resources to get those things that we don't have currently right now in the schools and within our community, because the barriers are there for a reason, right? Because you need to build economics, and there's certain conditions and situations you need in place in order for you to have economics. Now, in my opinion, I think at some point there may be a priority for the health and wellness of the community later on, but right now, that's not how business works.
It is not how business works.
But I would say we can't ride a wave that's actually a riptide. It's a riptide.
Well, I would say that the majority of the people you're talking about helping has already been gutted out the city.
Yeah.
And there's a handful that's left.
We're
And
just trying to swim parallel.
well, that's the thing about it. And I would say that outside of the ones that own homes, the majority of them are actually renting, and that's just because the actual absentee corporations that own those homes haven't decided to actually invest, remodel them, and actually add the rent to another $800, $900 a month, which means that those renters, right, they won't be here. So what I'm saying is that it's not riding a riptide, but at some point you have to be able to actually ride it to get to a destination and then take the resources, right, and build up the ones that's actually still here, right? Because if we don't, right, you have this, a tsunami doesn't care what it goes through. And again, just mentioning some of the things we just mentioned, like that port was significant 100 years ago, very significant, and they made it significant again. And you can see the actual engine that's been built around it or whatnot. So I guess I'm agreeing with you, but also saying that I think pushing back on the why is places us inside of a situation to where we can get stuck there, right?
Yeah.
Because we know why, right? Now the question is, right, how do I take your brilliance and the brilliance of these professionals here and say, okay, how can we pivot, right, and actually then do what we can do to save and to build, right? So I wanted to add, like, absolutely, like what you said was powerful, but just the why piece, you said it.
Yeah.
You said the why.
You're right. We can't get stuck.
Yeah. No, and I'm not the person that everybody here will tell you I'm with the why, right? Don't get it wrong, right? But, right, I think there's some additional emphasis that I think has to be put on how do we redirect some of these resources, how do we build off of these resources, and then empower professionals like yourself, right, who are doing what you're doing as a Wilmingtonian with that knowledge and that understanding, representing who you represent. Like, how do those resources then get concentrated in those spaces in order to uplift not just the populations you represent, but all Wilmingtonians, right? I'm gonna let the rest of them answer the question as well, too.
Well, I really like what you said about the fact that educators' primary role is to educate.
Yes.
That's based on an outdated model. We are not acknowledging the state of the world when we say that. You're not wrong.
Mm-hmm. I'm okay with being wrong, too. It's a whole model.
Where are we now? We are at a place where we cannot ignore community mental health, and that a job of an educator is now, first and foremost, to create the safe environment to allow kids to learn. Learning is easy. It's natural. And I went for several years to an alternative school where there was no curriculum. Guess what? We learned. We were safe. We were seen. We were honored. What we believed was listened to. And those kids in middle school created amazing things. We learned. The learning is not the issue. So I'm going to push back a little bit. Sorry, just to get on the bandwagon.
Yes.
We have to start acknowledging where we are in the world. And where this shows up for me in the school system is that we have a school board that still has a very old vision of how the world is supposed to be. We see it, by the way, and it's not just this board, for years, how it created neighborhood schools. Well, what are we saying is like we kind of want to hang out with our own kind, which is ignoring the problems that exist in our communities. It's a sort of the same idea, is that as long as we keep an outdated model, we're not going to understand what's in front of us. What I do like about what's going on in the schools right now is something that's a new program Danielle and I were talking about. It's called reframing behavior, and I think it fits nicely into the conscious discipline that Angie works with. This idea that in order to deal with the child's behavior issues, which come from needs not being met, from a child not being able to regulate, from a child's brain turning off the frontal cortex, which is the rational thinking centers, and going to the amygdala, which is a fear-based reactionary response. In order for that child to regulate again, he or she must be in an environment that is regulated, which is getting back to what you said about how our teachers create a safe space. So the reframing behavior is really looking first at how do we get our teachers to self-regulate. Because it is not easy being an educator. More and more tasks, larger and larger classrooms, less and less resources, more disconnect from the community, parents upset at what's going on in their classrooms. These educators are up against it. And you wonder why they lose their self-regulation.
I agree. So I guess my question for that is, if the people with the resources are not prioritizing the training and allocation of resources to help those teachers take full capacity to support the children, right? Help self-regulate themselves and the children with larger classrooms, lesser resources, then how do we put that emphasis on the teachers? Because in order for the teachers to do it, the people with the resources have to allocate. They have to prioritize. And going back to, that's not how economics-driven community works, right? So then it brings us back to the question, and I think you're in a position where you can say this more authoritatively than anyone here because you're in politics, right? So you're there wrestling and fighting, right? So you get it. What does the landscape there look like when it comes to, right, getting that prioritization for resources?
I think government has always been, maybe always will be, more focused on the economic concerns. Community is far more concerned about our general well-being. How do we create a symbiosis that allows at least some of those resources to go towards supporting community wellness? And that's partly what the reframing behavior is. It's paid for by a grant. I don't know. I think it's only a 2 or 3 year grant, right? And so what's going to happen next? Right? We'll be grasping for other programs that can help us based on this economic model that government controls.
Okay.
You saw our county government just cut funds to every single nonprofit in our county.
Yeah.
Those are those products, that's what makes living in Wilmington special.
Yeah.
So, how do we get government to be more concerned about community well-being and use some of those economic resources?
Yeah.
And then how do we get the community, which is what we have to keep talking about.
I think she wanted to follow up. I'm gonna give you both of you guys gonna get a chance to speak to this and whatnot. I think she had a quick follow up. I hear from her.
Yeah, so my follow-up is that we had that before. I remember going to MLK Center anytime I wanted to play. They had games, they had resources, they had something like this. Dakota House would come. I mean, a little kid from Gervais Projects, I was able to take gymnastics, I was able to, it don't look like it, but I was able to take gymnastics, and I was able to go swimming. I was able to have access to all these things because our city government, it took us on field trips, it took us I was exposed and I was safe in that space. Yes, my mom was there because she was that mom, but I was there in these spaces. Every public housing, we moved over to Hillcrest when I was 10 years old. We learned how to cook. We had Madafo, he would come teach drumming. We had
Rest in peace. Yeah.
oh, what's her name? We had several people come teaching public speaking. We had people come teaching writing, like artistic writing. We had all of those things in our public housing spaces.
But you know, the 2020 vision was a vision that needed that resiliency not to actually be sustained because they needed the shift in populations. Like the community you spoke about wasn't generating revenue. They wasn't generating, you know what I'm saying, what was needed to make this city.
But it did generate revenue.
No, what I mean by this is that like like currently right now I've witnessed since I got here in 2016 rent go from maybe $600-700, right? You know what I'm saying? It's at the downtown area now it's like what, $1,500 for 1 bedrooms, that type of economics, right? So the population, in order for the economics to thrive, it's gentrification. You have to shift another population out. So investment in parks, investment in resources, investment in actual support, investment in not-for-profits. If I need you there and we want you to function there, then I'm going to allow those things to thrive, right? And I'm going to try to keep you as comfortable and safe as possible. But when you're not a part of my larger vision to achieve this goal, what is clear is defined as the greater good, right? It's the rationale is that this is for the greater good of not just our region, but the overall region to thrive economics. Then unfortunately, there's collateral damage. That population of people that had those resources and had those things, they can no longer be here. We need a new population of people coming here. So I hear you on that.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that as we're thinking, if we're going to bring back a component of that, how do we bring it back within a lens that is somewhat consistent with this dominating agenda?
So I would say that if we look at the long term, right, that generation that grew up, my generation that grew up from 1980, or even I would go back to 1979 until around 2010, that generation generated money.
Yes.
And then because it started to be stripped away, they left. My peers are not in Wilmington. I intentionally stayed in Wilmington. I can go anywhere and make twice as much money. And I intentionally came back to Wilmington, called back. I don't want to be here. I was called back to Wilmington because the little brown and black girls and boys see me. Mm-hmm. And they may wonder, oh, she's not for him. But no, guess what? Guess where I grew up? In my therapy sessions, I get to tell them, like, no, where you come from doesn't determine who you are. That population that we invested in from that time, even prior to that time, have left because they saw this slow, gradual pull away of economics from these people. But had they continued, then we would continue to have a thriving hub. They're not hiring people in Wilmington to work in these spaces. They're bringing people in from Chicago, from New York. When Verizon came, half the population was from Nyack, New York. Half the population. Very few Wilmingtonians got in there. And if they did, they didn't adjust to our culture. They maintained a business culture. And they didn't adjust. So our people had to find other jobs.
Would you agree, and I'm let the others speak, would you agree that, so what has to happen is that, so let's think about it, community resources is being gutted. County just shut them down. Right. The endowment is saying that their priority is actual upstream, right? They've kicked in $170 million already, and they're kind of slowing down what they're going to do, and they're saying that they want to prioritize for the next generations. So that means that a significant amount of interventions and also recovery, you know what I'm saying, of programs are going to be not funded, right? They're going to be funding for the kids. So non-for-profits, like mental health,
they're going to be funded for the kids?
They're going to be funded. Their priority is upstream. And upstream means babies, right? And early. Well, you got to convince them. I'm telling you what that. I'm on the same page with you, right? I'm just telling you the landscape. And what I'm saying within that landscape, right? There's going to be some significant gaps, right? That is going to be, and we say this because for the people that's in the Dakota House, we represent that gap. We've never been really funded here, right? We've really been trying to get it from the community. So one of the things we're trying to offer, and I'm saying this, I'm spending time with you on this because I want to be clear that the community, we have to get out into the community and actually build with the community and teach them how to actually adjust in order to actually thrive.
Absolutely.
Right? Because the environment is not going to actually adjust to them. They already showed that I'm going to do what I'm going to do and you're going to accept this. Right? So in order to get the brilliance, in order to get that community like health, in order to get the resources to those teachers, right, to get those parents and those professionals back into the schools, right, we're not going to get the resource from the quote unquote powers that be, maybe some resources. I think the work of advocacy, the work that everyone does, like I'm not completely like give this, oh no, it's no hope. But I don't have.
No, I agree. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And a question you asked Dr. Merritt.
Okay.
I'm sorry for taking it, but the question you asked Dr. Merritt was that, what does that landscape look like? How do we change that landscape? How do we get the powers to be? Well, we got to vote. I mean, our city overwhelmingly put 3 women on the city council. We got to do that across the board. We got to change the school board. I don't have an opinion because, public. But we got to change the school board.
Yes.
We got to change the school board to people who look like the community, represent the entire community.
I'm about to
not
say,
just-
because they do look like the community. It's
But-
majority white society. Let's be clear. That argument don't work too much all the way. We're 11% population. It's not the community look like. We need the actual minds of the community. At this point, right? It's not the ethnicity.
No,
It's the
I'm
mindset,
saying-
right? Because the majority of Wilmington is white. Let me get a couple of other panelists, but we can go. I love this, right? It's excellent. It's good.
Yeah. So I just want to
reiterating the question, right? Or did you want to build off of what they had going on?
Oh
or-
yeah, for sure.
Okay,
for
let's
sure.
go.
Because I do think that there is a solution focused, like a resolution based on what like Danielle is saying. You can't move forward until you like look back in the rearview mirror and like acknowledge that it is intentional. Like when we look at like we intentionally divide, not we, like leadership, and Tim, I'm not speaking to you here because I know you're on our team, but but like it's intentional that our community is divided. Like it's by design that when schools for redistricting, when the line is drawn through Creekwood and one side goes to New Hanover and the other side goes to Laney, that is intentional division. Yeah. And when we can call it, neighborhood schools, we can call it whatever, but when we intentionally prohibit parents from being able to be involved and then we criticize them in the same voice and say, why aren't you here? Well, I passed by 5 schools just to get to the school where my kid goes, and their schools are outside of their community. And so when we drew lines for redistricting, we spent a lot of money, talking about money and being fiscally responsible. We brought in a group called Cropper from Ohio who had never even been to Wilmington before. Never been. You have all these people who've lived here our whole lives. They intentionally got someone from outside, brought them in, paid them big bucks, and then told them that race wasn't even a factor to be on the survey when making the consideration of how to draw those lines. So those decisions are intentional when we do things like that. And so I guess what I'm saying is like when we want to move forward and what Tim was saying about reframe, I completely agree with the reframing behavior initiative, but here's where my problem lies. And Daniela touched on this a little bit. We change something every year or two. We don't give it time to work. We go and we train and we say that we're investing, and then we don't, because everybody knows that unless you allow a program 5 years, you're not going to see the results because it doesn't have time to do that. And so what we do
because
is
the grant gets taken away, and so we have to start something new, and it's crazy.
True, but at the same time, we've trained. Like I'm a conscious discipline instructor, and Wilmington is my home, but I train more way outside of Wilmington because Wilmington can't commit to anything. And when they do, they want to our school board, our admin, they want to pick the pieces they like and implement those, and then they say, well, it didn't work. And it hasn't had time to. So here's what I would argue is I started at Head Start. That's in the 90s when I started working at Head Start. And that is a program that has had longevity that most other programs can't say that they had. Why was it successful? Because it was in the community that it served. It was comprehensive. It had nutrition, transportation, mental health, healthcare as a whole. Every kid had a social worker, not just the kids that they handpicked out and said, oh, they did something that, red flagged them. Every kid had that. And one of the best things that we did is we invested from the community that we serve.
Who funded it?
It was federally funded. And it was federally funded, for 30, 40 years. We actually had it under our school system until last year when we lost that grant. And so, but it's still here. But the thing about Head Start is that it it's very in line with like our community health worker model, because you're basically taking those people who already have those relationships. They already have the trust factor like is already built, and you're inviting them in. That's the thing we don't do here. We go extra lengths to, like Daniela said, like when parents do want to be involved, we say, no, you can't. You can't come read a class. You can't even be involved in your own child's education on some levels, you know? And like that's the exact opposite of what we're saying a community-based response would be helpful in. And it is fiscally responsible. When you're bringing in your community and you're giving them jobs and you're letting them invest in their kids' education, there's nothing that's fiscally irresponsible about that. It's just, it doesn't fall in line with the agenda. That's what it is.
Yeah. So I think that's excellent. So Head Start, you said that it's no longer federally funded, but it's still around, right?
So it is federally funded through a grant. It used to stand alone and just be Head Start and pre-K were two totally different things. Then we housed it under our school system umbrella. Still, Head Start has their own entity, their own funding source, their own regulations, but they were at least housed under the same umbrella with the school system as pre-K. But Head Start's very different because unlike pre-K, Head Start has requirements that you have. Like if your kid goes to Head Start, you have to prove that you've in some way invested through volunteering or getting training. Like they invest in the community, whereas pre-K doesn't have all of those ramifications. But yeah, it's federally funded, solid federally funded until this administration where nothing is. Yes,
like
absolutely.
Our generation was the first to receive Head Start funding and
Right.
the research that tracked us.
And what is the rest of the Head Start, like administrative staff, like are they like integrated into the community? Are they working with the community? Are they comfortable? Is that, and I say that because again, one of the things that the endowment is prioritizing, again, whether we want to or not, we're going to have to always like be knocking at their door, right? But Head Start is definitely falls in the category of actual primary prevention and whatnot. So just something as far as like in this space, hearing that like spark the actual plug of something to focus on as a possible agenda and maybe build relationships around something that can be supported and then expanded with other type of partnerships. So that was excellent and whatnot.
And because it is federally funded, like you're a data person, there's a ton of data that shows us that like pre-K education, and Head Start, by the way, starts at 3, so 3 and 4 year olds, instead of just waiting till 4. And keeping in mind that kids that are EC kids that need individualized education plan, they get a Head Start because they already have that when they go into the public school system. Whereas more times than not, exactly what Tim was saying with being missed, like having autism and being missed, that doesn't happen when you have a program like that.
That's excellent. So again.
I'm going to shut my mouth because I can talk about pre-K all day long.
All day
I'm going
long.
to be quiet and let you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I actually want to circle back to what you talked about with education. When we're serving the youth, they're learning what it means to live on this world for the first time. They're learning what it means to be a person and to exist in this crazy thing that we call life. So education means helping them with that, helping them learn what it is to exist in this world and how to cope with the heaviness this world brings. And something that DC Virgo does and does very well is CRM, Community Resiliency Model. And the Community Resiliency Model, you learn what these emotions feel like in your body. So you can stop and you can take a minute and you can say, wait, I'm angry, and I can try and unpack why. Because we're trying to raise children, but we never even got taught how to emotionally regulate ourselves. I know I never got taught pure emotional regulation. I went back and I taught myself, so now I know, okay, maybe I wouldn't have gotten into those fights in middle school and high school if I had these coping mechanisms. So now I can go back and I can teach the youth those coping mechanisms. I can say, okay, you want to go fight right now? Tell me why. Tell me what it feels like in your body that's telling you that you want to go fight that person right now. Okay, you're saying your hands are really, really clenched up? Let's talk about what to do next. All right, I'm looking at my hands. I notice they're clenched up. Breathe, let go. Okay, we let go. Let's put them in front of us. Now we're gonna go up and we're gonna breathe. I taught this to my crim class last week. When we go up our finger, we breathe in. When we go down our finger, we breathe out. So we have 3 steps. We realize that our hands are clenched. We open our clench, and then we breathe. And the children, they actually loved it. And it worked for me too, and they were excited that it worked for them. And we don't tell them these things because it's like, I don't want to be cringy, I don't want to be corny. We're the ones that are making it cringy. We're the ones that are making it corny. A kindergartner doesn't know what the hell corny means unless you tell them that that's corny. So let them cope. Teach them how to cope. And teach our parents how to cope too. Because we, as a community, have been through so much. And we have to go back and we have to heal our traumas before we try and help someone else with theirs and before we try and build life.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much. That's excellent. We're not done. I got another question for y'all. That was excellent. We went hard on that one. That was good. That was good. I love this. So, and I want to precursor this with I try to pay attention to whomever is inside of an environment that responsibility is being placed on. And I try to be aware of what their positionality is, right? And a lot of responsibility is being placed on the teachers, right? While also understanding that they're under-resourced, also understanding they may be even not all the way trained, right? Because their training is for education, but we know it's a new world, right? So there needs to be additional level of awareness, and many teachers have that, let's be clear, right? I've run into some amazing teachers, right? They use art and all type of creative stuff, right? But in this environment here, our teachers are under-resourced, under-supported. Like Angie, you know this, and Tim, like every time there's a board meeting, they're present, advocating for themselves, practically begging, right, to be supported. Let's just be honest, right? Like, and while they're begging and advocating for themselves, there's other groups advocating for something completely different, right? And not ignoring them, but because everybody has their agenda, they're really ignoring them and not saying, okay, well, if I'm asking for this, that means that you really, like, for instance, and I respect the agenda and the movement, right? The addressing suspensions, right? So if they don't get suspended, then who's left with them? The teacher, right? So the teacher's like, with that, like, I got to deal with that, right? So thinking realistically in terms of, in order to make that change happen properly, you have to have people in positions of power willing to allocate resources and also change policies that allow for certain things to happen that's not happening. Like, for instance, parents to be back inside the classrooms. They're not allowing that, right? There's all type of barriers, right, for that to happen, protocols, and there's not resources getting there. So with those two roadblocks, I'm gonna propose a potential solution, and then I wanna hear you guys expound on what that can possibly be, right? Because I love the fact that in the midst of keeping our finger on the nerve, like the word nerve, right, because it irritates, right, of really where the problem is at. And I think Tim, Dr. Merrick, and Danelia did an excellent job of saying, no, like, this is where we at. I'm not letting up. Like, this is where our problem is. We be clear. Right? And then I think Angie supported that, but also then on purpose, or maybe not on purpose, you dropped the jewel with the Head Start, right? So it's like, hey, we can rock with that, right? That may be in alignment with these people's agenda right now, right? Something to push on. I want to offer something else for us to think about, because we're talking about community, right? And how to bring in community education, how to bring in community healing, community that can help us provide this, community that can help us with the substance abuse, the community that can help us with the mental health. Like, how can the community, right, help us with this? Well, if community can't get into the schools, then how do we develop a network where the community-based organizations and the people doing the work in the community, who are also being underfunded right now, let's be clear, right? How do we, two, support those community-based organizations to be able to position themselves to sustain the work that they're doing? That's one, right? In an economic rich environment, right? You're gonna hear that from me for probably the next 5, 6, 7 years if I'm here in Wilmington or whatnot. How do we take the non-for-profit social impact work, right, and turn it into social enterprise within an actual economic rich environment, redirect those resources and then support social impact? I'm gonna be talking about that, right? But that's a long-term conversation. The immediate conversation now is you do have some community-based organizations, social service organizations in the community present and available to work. How do we make the connection between the teachers, the social workers, right, the clinical therapists, when they reach capacity, and they're not able to do what it is they would like to do because they have a very limited scope. How do we begin to bridge the gap to the networks that's available in the community and begin to become more collaborative and making sure that the people get the resources they need from these community-based organizations? How is that possible? And I know one of the barriers we may run into is, well, it shouldn't be a barrier, right? This becomes a not-for-profit problem, right? You know what I'm saying? If you're getting money to provide deliverables, you should never be turning down clients, right, to help. But there's clearly barriers there. Do you guys have any suggestions on how we can, if we can't enter into the schools and be heavily present in the schools, how do community and community-based organizations support? And I'll give you one example of what that could possibly look like PTAs, right? Is there a way to build a more robust, lively PTA ecosystem, right, inside of our city? And is there other ways that y'all think, I want to give that example, other ways that you guys think from your lens that we can begin to build that nexus and that relationship to say, okay, what we can't do, can you help us with? Can I direct you? Can I refer you? Anyone?
So PTA, that's great. So we start with this structure. And the PTAs are funded by parents. And we have, look at a school like Rachel Freeman where we have 99% free and reduced lunch, which means that every single person in that school is economically challenged. They don't have a PTA because how do they fund it? Okay. But we do also have community organizations that have risen to a level of organization to be able to have a memorandum of understanding with the school districts. I mean, one that I look at again and again and really appreciate is communities and schools. And what they've done perhaps for instance, at Freeman, they have the organization, they have the skills, they have the structure whereby they can come to the schools and say, here, and they also have funding streams that are not from the schools. And what they did at Freeman this year by having 2 days after school for a couple of hours and staying with the kids, and what we had as an increase in reading scores and math scores, it was really impressive. Helping kids to just stay in the environment a little bit longer, having specific adult interaction, engagement, trust, belonging. Those, and I do hear, and I've heard many times, parents that want to go in and help, and the system is not set up well. I sort of ambushed the superintendent at his last listening tour, where I was there listening, but I kind of acted like a parent for a second and said, well, what about volunteering in the schools? And how do we get more community people in our schools? And I was like, I understand it from a district level. If 300 people want to volunteer, you've got to have 300 different conversations, vetting systems, training. It's not easy. So we do have to have the nonprofits that have that already in place and bring them into the schools. We do have to make it easier for parents to come in.
So the in the school still is an actual very slim, like, window in, right? How do we get the school to access this broad network of resources outside of the school?
Can I play devil's advocate with
Yes,
you? Just
please.
for a second, because I want that too.
Yes.
And then I listen and I talk to educators and I talk to principals and I talk to the superintendent, and they say, well, a lot of times what we have parents that want to come in because they want to hang out with their kid. We heard Daniela say that's not what she, or saying that's not what she wants. She wants to help this classroom so that her child can get the best from it. But we don't always have the best motive or the best training for parents to come in. So we have to be careful with that.
We're talking about the community-based organization. I'll give you an example, right? So, and I say this because when DC opened up, I was working with Blue Room Commission at the time. It was Voyage. So we hired the teachers for the lab school with UNCW. And that one opened up when it actually shifted, when UNCW. So I was on the hiring committee, right, for the teachers, the first cohort of actual lab, for the lab school, right, with the teachers and whatnot. So we had community health workers. Actually, Sister Brenda Galloway here, she was one of our community health workers that was located in DC Virgo, right? And DC Virgo, UNCW actually hired, right, at that time, they actually paid for those community health workers to be in the schools. We spent maybe 20% of our time in the school, right? only to be there to actually identify the people who was actually considered to be most high flyers and dealing with the most challenging situations. And once they was identified, those community health workers then went to the parents and said, hey, listen, your child's having some challenges at school. You know that, I know that, right? You might also got some other things going on. We have a whole community center with a myriad of other resources, employment opportunities, training, parent coaching, whatever it is you're in need of. Is it okay that we work with your youth? Also know your child's having some challenges with administration, maybe some issues with their teachers. The school is comfortable with us kind of like supporting. We're not necessarily in the school on a regular basis. We're only there for very specific reasons. Our job is to connect you to resources outside of the school. You understand, social determinants are dominating these children's lives. And we're still thinking that maybe the school, and it is a major solution. It could be, but right now it's not being allowed to be because it's under-resourced. It's under-supported. They're still not giving the money to the teachers. They're still not giving the money to the schools. So how do we shift that? If we can't get it into the school and try to squeeze something in and asking people to give us something that they clearly don't want to give us, and how do we adjust to what the school begin to say, you know what, we have all these community, not just communities in schools, it's a lot of community-based organizations, trained professionals, right? Clinically supported professionals, right? In addition to other professionals that offer resources, like we have the whole Healthy Opportunities pilot here, where that was offering food, housing, transportation, and addressing toxic stress. This is a Medicaid-funded, $650 million project across the state of North Carolina. Schools, right? I'm not gonna say should, I'm not gonna point fingers at them. How do we encourage schools to get innovative enough to think outside of the school and say, how do we access community? We think community, we're saying that we bring community into the schools. That's not a pipeline right now that's thriving. We have to shift the narrative, right? Is that possible, or how is that possible? What's the barriers that you would think that would come from that?
I mean,
Okay.
no, you go ahead.
I think we have to look at one of the assumptions that I'm hearing that hasn't been explicitly stated, but that schools have the autonomy to do that. They don't. And so there's several times my kid was going to Winter Park right next to my job, and I constantly went to the principal, hey, you have a large Hispanic population. I have a Hispanic therapist who speaks Spanish. We are willing to come in after school to talk to parents, to help however you need. Crickets.
So again, that's going into the schools. So
Yeah.
again, that's still squeezing in.
Or even putting the...
You can't put a flyer out. So is there a barrier? Are schools not allowed to put flyers out and make resources known to people?
I mean, I think like, so like a lot of people would like us
Wow,
to believe that
that's a big question.
there are some barriers there, but there are also some ways around those barriers too that aren't given out like freely to parents, and so or even like community-based organizations. Like the funny thing is you know, they would like for us to believe that there's this teacher versus parent kind of thing, but the teachers want parents in there just as much as we want to be in there. But like Daniela said, there's this red tape. And we even have some administrators who operate under the whole ask for forgiveness, not permission kind of thing, that'll be like, come on. Because technically, there is a policy that says anyone can volunteer, anyone in a school. You don't even have to have a child in the school system. As long as you pay $20, pass their criminal background check, anyone should be able to volunteer. But the thing is that they spend as much time. For the first 15 years of my career, we explored options of how do we get parents to be involved. And this is when they were in close proximity to their kids. Now the district, and I say the district because that's where the breakdown is. It spends more time figuring out how they can keep us quiet and keep us out of those classrooms. But in answer to your question, like there are ways that, you know, we can get around that.
I think you're still asking about how to get in.
I would say the trick.
I'm trying
into the community.
Out into the community. How do we shift the narrative? I'm hearing that there's a narrative of how things are traditionally done that keeps us thinking that the goal is to go into the schools, and it is, but we know that we have some significant systemic barriers that's stopping that. So then, is there a way, and I propose one, I know that one of the things we used to do is the school, I guess communities in school have that relationship, but community in schools don't do much outside of the schools. They're not in the homes. They're not going to Like, I'll give you an example. When we did the work, we'll get an actual family member. The school said, listen, we have no authority. We can't give you the permission to interact with this child, right? You have to get it from the parent. So we'll be commissioned, we'll go actually knock on the door of the parent, right? They're already dealing with some type of, like I had a couple of parents, I personally did the work, right? Was actually getting ready to go to jail for truancy, right? Because the child wasn't going to school or whatnot. I knocked on the door, right? The social worker's over there in the car, right? You know what I'm saying? And I pull up, right? And I'm asking her, because I know her from DC Burger, like, look, she's not there. I'm like, okay, I know they there. Actually, the kids is there, but the mom ain't there, right? You know what I'm saying? So I wait, go around the corner, right? Come back around an hour later, she's gone, knock on the door. Kids unlock the door. Actually, mama was there. Mama was up inside the house hiding, right? Because the social worker was out there. Wasn't trying to interact with the social worker. She's dealing with a truancy case. Point. In interacting with them, I asked her, I said, listen, like, I need permission from you, because she was avoiding me as well too, right? And I said, I need permission from you. I'm trying to help you. Like, these people are knocking on your door. They're trying to take your kids. You have to go to jail. I'm trying to help you. I don't work for the school. I work for a community-based organization. I work for the Blue Ribbon Commission, Voyage, right? We have these potential resources. Let me help you get these people out your business. I know you're not a bad person, but you guys are dealing with depression, right? Got all type of other stuff going on, multiple different kids, right? And in that, I got her permission. With that permission, I was then able to go back to the school and say, hey, she's giving me permission to support her youth. If he has any problem going on at the school, please call us or whatnot. We can come here and help him out. The school was okay with that, because now the school is not responsible because we'd be getting permission from the actual parent. There was a subtle piece of concern, right, as it relates to once I'm on school campus, which is the reason why once I'm on school campus, right, there's have to be some memorandum of understanding and different things of that nature. So it goes back into, that's how I know that there's a squeeze. Once you enter into the school campus, and I get it, I got kids, right? In all fairness, man, if something happened to my child and you had somebody that was on campus that wasn't qualified to be there, somebody's gonna have a problem. So I get that. I also get that as well too, right?
You're
You
in
know
a
what I'm saying?
litigious society.
You feel me?
Yeah.
Like, so what I want to propose to us to think about, because we're clear about the barriers, they're not allowing us in like we want to, they're not supporting the funding right now like they want to. Is there a way to begin to think about and talk about ways that the teachers and maybe administration, without breaking any rules of their own, can not even refer, maybe promote or make parents aware of resources that's available to their students in their neighborhood? Like, be targeted. You live in this particular neighborhood, but this community-based organization is there in that neighborhood that actually can help you out. Like that type of stuff.
I just clarify what you said with the memorandum of understanding. So that is a fancy term for contract with the district.
Okay.
And so that is like for an organization. And to be quite honest with you, the biggest memorandum of understanding in this entire county is between the school and the sheriff's department. And then there are some other ones, Communities of Schools is one of them, that have been in Coastal Horizons, carousel centers, that kind of thing, that have been contract for a while. But outside of that, what you're talking about is if any parent in the district signs a mutual exchange of information for anybody, whether they're professional, whether they're just someone advocating for them, that's how I get interested in the school. Like, they don't want me there half the time. Yeah. But if that parent or that student wants me there, then I can be. So, for example, like Daniela, like with your practice, if a family signs one of those little the mutual exchange of information for you guys as a therapist or whatever, they then have to like talk to you.
So
they have to
before you go, I want to make that connection real quick. There's cold connection. So what Angie just did in an indirect way, and maybe even direct, she's brilliant like that. So therapists are interacting with students who are dealing with challenges in schools, right? But the therapist has access to the parent and to the child. The therapist can say, hey, you may be dealing with some other social determinants of health that may be of assistance, resources you need. Here's this community-based organization that you can link to. This community-based organization can then strategically come and say, hey, if I'm getting permission, I can go to the schools and advocate on behalf of your child. You understand what I'm talking about? How do we create this system?
No, I get it. My question is, how do you get, so in my particular organization, we operate like a outpatient, we operate like an outpatient, so you come to us, right? Mm-hmm. But I go out and I do things like this and other community events. So my question is, to know who need, because I have an idea. I want to do what I'm calling community invest. I want to take children, high school students, those folks, come here, let me teach you how to do these skills so that you can go back and teach other kids how
Yes.
to replicate this. But my question is, I can't even get in to say or figure out the data to say, oh, this is my target audience. This is who the parents that I
Talking about as far as the schools?
if we're working with the children in the schools, like
Yeah.
if whoever comes to me, they already have the means for the most part, and they already know and are aware of therapy. But there are people who are not, and how do I say, okay, if I'm going to work with parents or I'm going to work with teachers, how do I get that out there if I'm trying to get a teacher or a parent to say you can go in? So
Yeah, so one of the things I would say that if, in those scenarios, again, there's clinical settings, there's also food settings, there's also housing settings, right? There's multiple different settings that once you're interacting with a child or even adult, because you're doing therapists for children and for actual adults, and you notice that there's some things beyond your therapeutical capacity to help with. You're dealing with stuff at home. Your therapy happens within a certain session, within a certain wall, right? You may be able to do extra stuff, right? But in the general rule, your area of focus is to provide them therapeutical services, right? But they may be dealing with other stuff, right? Then now it becomes expanding our network and saying, okay, well, there's these other organizations in your area. Like, where do you live at? Or you live in that area? Okay, you over there on like Dawson Street area or down the street off Sakota House is over there. Or if you go over on this side of town, right, such this organization over there. And if there's an existing conversation to say, hey, listen, right, are you okay with me, you know what I'm saying, doing a warm handoff and actually referring you to them to see if there's a way they can support you, right? Through there, then we get a phone call and we say, okay, cool. Like, what school do your child go to? Oh, you go there? Okay, cool. Like, what's going on? Is everything okay in school? Yeah, we all right, but he's having some problems with some bullying.
It's a little different for me, but I do that for other organizations.
Yes.
But it's a little different because I'm strictly clinical. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a case manager.
Yes.
So that would be outside of my realm. But I hear you.
So do anybody in your organization, and that's what we have, and that's what I'm trying to figure out, the innovative thinking, right? Because that restriction inhibits us from being able to say, I'm looking at someone therapeutically, and I'm about to give them this treatment, but I know they're about to go back into an environment that maybe in the next hour going to completely destabilize everything I spent my time with, right? How do I support them outside of that?
I can't do it.
Right? So even with letting them know that there's organizations out there,
I can do that. I do.
yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. Like, so
Yeah.
that we have to expand our ecosystem. What's happened is that we've been trained, not all of us, not you, but all of us in general has been trained inside of society as if we function in silos. And the community don't think that way. The community understands that everything they're dealing with, food, housing, transportation, that cat down the street that's oppressing my child every time they come home from school, the situation I got going on at work, all that stuff is happening to them at once. It's all one thing, right? And they're looking for a world to help them begin to actually respond to those things comprehensively, not in silos. Hey, I'm going to help you right here, and I know you got all that stuff going on, but I only can do this for you. How do we as a community, right, informally, because one of the most unregulated, but probably most powerful, right, networks we have is community, right?
Again, I'm going to push a little bit.
It's good.
I do like what you're saying, is that instead of getting the community to come to schools, how does the schools come out into the community?
I'm saying that we've been told very clearly that there's no resources being increased,
right,
and there's restrictions to get in.
Absolutely.
So that's limited.
Right.
Okay.
But to ask the schools right now to go into the community when they're already so incredibly overworked and underfunded. So we need to have the middlemen, if you will. We need to have the community organizations who can act as a go-between. And of course, if they have the structure, it's a whole lot easier for them to go through the bureaucratic nonsense of getting into our schools. And I just have to say, we must change, this is longer term, but we must start thinking community-based when we talk about our schools, because, well, we've lost over 500 teaching positions in the last few years because of funding. We haven't lost that number of kids, okay? We are seeing a trend. We don't like it, we can beef about it, but the fact of the matter is, the money is probably going to keep getting less and less for quite a while until we do vote other people into office. So we must find a new paradigm of community involvement in our schools. And so the bureaucracy has to change. We have to be able to have, you know, school district oversight, community involvement, parents, and community organizations in the community. And we have to have the nexus that you're talking about. But I don't think it's going to be 1,000 parents coming into our schools, and I don't think it's going to be teachers, you know, going out into the
No, I'm not suggesting. I'm be clear on that. I want to make sure you understand what I'm saying with that. It's definitely not what I'm suggesting. I'm already talking about the teachers being overburdened.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that, for instance, someone coming to Dakota House, and I keep saying this, but it's important for you to understand, if everybody understands, we're unsupported, we're unfunded. But how do we support so many people, right? One is we activate a very robust network of referrals, right? And we understand our lane and our capacity, right? So if someone comes here and they're dealing with a severe mental health issue, which you're on Dawson Street, we get that every day. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we've had episodes, not every day, but frequently, right? We got no problem with picking up the phone and calling the necessary professionals. We got no problem with referring people to the necessary professionals. If someone needs housing, we cannot put nobody in our home. They can't sleep with us, right? So who's providing services for housing, right? If somebody needs help with, you know what I'm saying, food, who's providing services for food? We make a phone call, we direct them to them. We have to function in realizing that, and schools have to do it too. When I've reached capacity, if I care about these kids, I can't just tap out. All I have to do is think about who else can help.
Yeah.
Who else? And let's think about it. You have counselors. I'm not talking about editing. You got counselors. You got social workers. You got regular staff members inside of that environment that's specifically designated that have an additional concern for the emotional and psychological well-being of that child beyond the educational setting, the teacher engagement. These are actual staff members. The capacity and knowledge for them to be trained to know what resources are available inside this community. So when they talk to a principal, when they talk to a teacher, or not a teacher, a parent, and that child has been fourth time been suspended for fights, and they got the social worker inside the room, and that teacher is in that space there, they should be able to say, there's this organization and this organization here that can help your child with mentorship, that can help your child, until they become innovative, right? And encouraging them to become innovative in that way, and us too, innovative in the work that we're doing, and being willing to actually share the responsibility. That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, that sounds like a community network.
Yes.
It's like an organization.
Ecosystem.
Is the Dakota House gonna build that?
We already building it. We have it. We have it.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to poop in the pool.
You're good. Come on. We have a conversation. We're good.
But, you know, here we have a situation where a teacher says, you know, there's a great community organization that you might want to get involved with.
Not teacher. Bring me a social worker and the principal.
Okay.
No, bring the case.
Or any of those.
Okay.
And what if, and that community organization is not under the auspices of the school system, and they're independent, and what if they do something untoward, and all of a sudden it comes back on the district?
But in fairness with that, though, that's like saying that if I have a child that needs food and I know they're actually starving, I say go to the food bank, they get poisoned by the food bank, they're accountable for that.
Yeah.
It's a community service, though. Let's be honest, though. It's a community service. They're community members. They're not responsible for that.
No.
They got all type of referrals inside the schools and whatnot. The point is, they're not. The referrals that they're picking and choosing in the schools or whatnot, what referrals they want to actually send people to.
Right.
And what I'm saying is that if we're really concerned about the actual young people, right, and their well-being, we're going to become innovative, and we're going to become a little bit more engaged in being able. But my point is this, though. Just what you said there is the reason why that don't happen. Because inside these rooms, when those discussions begin to happen, there's people that step up and say, "Oh, there's liability," and then it gets shut down. But in fact, though, if clarification is given, there is no liability there. That person's a community member, a resident in that community. All they're making them aware of the same way. Go to food line for food. They have a service. You go there, you pick and choose if you want their service. But my job is to make you aware that that service is there.
100%.
If I'm not doing that, though, I'm doing a disharm.
As long as you had some sort of hold harmless situation, so that the district.
Yeah, I got you. The language of how to keep them from, I got you.
But there is no liability at all, because like I work directly with teachers. I train them and I work with them. When I had that little magical piece of paper, which just to let everybody know, we have those here, access to those, hand them out to like parents, because once it's super easy to do to say, hey, this person can advocate on my behalf and those kind of things. But even without that, like if a teacher gives a resource, there's zero liability there because, I mean, they're, like you said, they're just passing along information, and that's where the power is. Like we have several little grassroots like advocacy groups who teach parents like about the policies. Truth be known, like advocates in this town know more than, no offense, but like board members and admin even at the schools, and empowering those parents with like education, and that includes education to resources.
Yes.
Because I have parents all the time come to me and say, you know, they're all about like therapy and mental health for their kid, but they want someone, like representation matters. They don't want to go through that small little like, you know, sheet of a checklist at the school. They want someone different, and we most certainly can connect them, and we don't have to ask permission to do that. Like that's a fear-based tactic for them.
And also to be clear about the network piece, I want to be clear, right? Again, so people know about Sakota House, but people also are not knowing about Sakota House. And I feel like, and I'm gonna be fair, right? It's professionals' fault if they don't know about Sakota House. They don't know about organizations like Sakota House, right? Currently, right now, Sakota House, someone give me a number. How many CHWs we have trained inside the Cape Fear region?
Inside Cape Fear?
Yeah.
There's 50 in Buncombe.
So it's about it's about maybe like 60?
Maybe 60.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
60 from about 26 different organizations. So Coastal Horizon, Blue River Commission has CHW VPPs, Link have CHW VPPs, right? Sakota House has CHW VPPs, and lowercase leaders, well, everybody in Sakota House, lowercase leaders, I'm saying Hope. So let's be clear about this. Every last one of our cohorts are on an actual text group. Any resource that's needed for any particular community member, from lowercase leaders giving them actual furniture, food, clothes, right, to housing opportunities, a text group, a text message goes out. Not just from us, but from other CHWs from different parts of this particular region, right? We built, right, off of no resources, right, a network of people that's willing to actually support, and they work within different organizations. The networks are here, and that's just us. There's other community-based networks that on a daily basis, they're getting paid to do one thing, but they're doing 90%, everything else they're not getting paid for, right? And until our institutions begin to actually, one, they should be supporting and funding that, but they're not. So I'm not gonna turn around and say, hey, you know, bad you, like whatever, right? At least access it. You understand what I'm saying? If you're not gonna support it, that's one thing. But if you're caring for the people that you wanna serve, you wanna at least let them know that these resources are there. Yes, ma'am.
I think that goes back again to having those vulnerable, open conversations, because you won't know what a family needs until you have that rapport and you are able to have that conversation of, hey, like, I know things are tough right now, and we have to get rid of the stigma. We have to talk about it, just like how you brought up drugs. It's not some big, bad thing. It's a way that people cope, and it's human, and it's part of the life experience. And we have to make sure that we have to know, hey, I'm not villainizing you for your life experience. I just want to give you the resources to get you through this life experience.
Absolutely.
And through DC Virgo, they do that a lot, which I really, really appreciate. We have those vulnerable conversations. We have that rapport with the families. So we do connect them with the community organizations that we can.
Yes.
Which I very much appreciate. But just keep on having those conversations, and especially with kids. Like, they tell you what they need most times.
Yes.
Kids are smart. We don't give them enough credit because they are great advocates for themselves if we give them the stage to be so.
I agree. You guys are excellent panel. I want to give everybody a chance to have some final words and whatnot, but I really appreciate the conversation. Very engaging. I love the actual back and forth. I'm a man of dialectics, so I think that every time you have an ideal that's challenged by another ideal, I'm the one that's looking for the synthesis of ideals. So I'm never adversely, challenged with, different opinions. It's very good. It was a very good conversation. But I want to leave the floor open for you guys to share anything with the audience. There will be people viewing this, right? It is being recorded. So we'll make sure that your bios and everything is shared about, your backgrounds and what you've contributed. Is there anything like to share with your audience before we wrap up? Everybody has a chance. Any final thoughts?
Well, my final thought is we've just been talking about how difficult it's been in this current climate. Check in with your loved ones. Check in with your students. If you're an educator, you are teaching people how to exist in the world we are in. So teach those coping mechanisms, and if you don't know them, learn them so then you can share them and be able to be present, because that's we have to rely on one another. And to do that, we have to be able to have those coping and grounding mechanisms within ourselves.
Thank you, Rose.
Well, thank you.
So I would just say like more of conversations like this, because I mean, even through this process, like both Danielle and I both are lifetime, like Wilmington, you know, like our whole lives have been spent in Wilmington, but we've just recently connected, right? So there's always like that piece that we can always do better and just kind of seek things out, and then just having like open conversation, because knowledge is power. Like that's the best way to advocate in every system, but particularly in the school system. Like when parents, when community members, you know, CHWs, when we know resources and can share them, like that empowers like parents to be able to then advocate for their kids. So I always like appreciate the opportunity to have those conversations and just, you know, clarify and ask questions and all that
Awesome.
kind of stuff. So thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for your contribution too as well, Angie. It's excellent. Thank you.
I appreciate this because I'm learning. And I hope I'm always learning.
I mean, me too. Me too. Me too.
But what I'm hearing from you, Abdullah, is that in terms of these strata, community, you know, parents, community, community organizations, schools, and other organizations, what you're doing by creating the nexus is huge, and I want to encourage you to go to the schools. They don't have time to come out to you. For you to have that sort of, you know, you've got your algorithms for who to call and when and how to get a hold of them, bring that to your principals, because I think they want that, and I'm not sure that it's not being done, but it's not being done either with fidelity or they don't have enough resources. So please do that. But the other thing I want to tell whoever's listening, back to Daniela's original point, there's agendas out there. And those agendas are not serving the vast majority of the public.
Agreed.
And if you want it to change long term, you got to start right now. Like we said, we saw a shift on Tuesday night all across the country. People are upset and they're starting to vote differently. But you know how it happens every single darn time. They say, I don't like what the county commission's doing. I don't like what the General Assembly in Raleigh's doing. I don't like what the administration in Washington's doing. But then they turn around and they vote for the same darn people again and again and again. Yeah. We have to start putting our vote where it matters. And we have to show up to vote. Too many people in our community that are most impacted by the negative policies that are being put forward by government, those folks are not showing to vote. And we have to shift that, and I don't have the answers. I'm depending on you.
I'm depending on you.
Thank you, Abdullah.
Thank you.
I just want to say, like, I'm learning, and I appreciate your redirection to, like, this is economics, right? And so I'm an English major, I'm a history major, I'm education, right? And I'm Black, and I'm from Wilmington.
Yes.
And so to me, that means that we can't get so future focused that we don't remember why this is here, why this happened. This happened because we were considered cattle. And then we considered 3/4 of a person, and that is not a short memory. People remember that and they hold on to it. And we have a group of people who are now considered illegal, which you can't be an illegal human because you're human, so you have a right to be here. And they treat them like a shadow. Like, these are shadow workers, you're only doing production. And so until we change this mindset of the economic zero-sum thinking, like we have a pie and you get a piece and I get none, that doesn't make sense. It's a pie. Until we shift that thought, we're going to be having groups of people like us who can think logically and holistically and in community, still fighting this machine that's like, look, they're getting more than you. Go take it all. That's just mindset. And if we can't change and shift mindset, then we stay at the bottom fighting for crumbs. And it's just not reasonable. So go vote. Have these conversations. I commend you for having these conversations. The more people engage, the more people talk, that's how mindset changes. You have to tell the story. You're telling the story, you're building empathy, you're letting people see that you got a little bit, but that could be easily taken away with one policy shift. And it has been for people. And so now they're thinking slightly different because, oh, I'm not on welfare, I'm not on entitlements. Well, what do you think your Social Security and your, those is a different name. And so they recognize that these things and conversations like this help people to shift and create and bringing different people together. We have to do that. And so I appreciate what you've done. I appreciate the invite. This is amazing. And reach out.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank all you guys. The only way any of this is possible is that you dedicate your oh, you got a question?
Yeah, I just have one quick question. All four of you guys represent different parts of the community as well as the education system. And I personally know you, so I'm grateful for you all taking time here. But in your different existences, you also do different things. Like you have different events that you push. You have different summits that you're behind. You have different drums that you beat that are very much in accord with what Sakota House does. So if there's an upcoming event or an important meeting, obviously voting just passed, but there's more like civic engagement that needs to be done like moving forward. Can you all, from each one of your perspective, just tell us what your next be on the lookout is? Like I've spoken with you, I know you do a lot of Black mental health locally, and there's events and things that you help advertise and pour in. Even if it's not like next week, if it's like a few months away, what is your next big engagement that we, the community, should be on the lookout for, and that we Sakota House can like help also raise awareness of? So again, also thank you, thank you for your time on the panel, but can you tell us your next be on the lookout for?
I know the next be on the lookout for DC Virgo is if anyone wants to run with our kids, we're having a 5K on December 7th at the UNCW track. And anyone under 14 years old, they need a buddy above 14 years of age. So you just need an ID, and we'd scan it at the school, and then you'd be able to be a run buddy. And our kids would love to be run buddies with people in our community. So I would strongly urge you.
She organizes the run club, so
yeah.
She's coming from an actual organization at the school. It's the run club, so they need run buddies.
Yes. So if you are interested, reach out to me, please.
Cool, awesome. You know, just in light of mental health, I work with a lot of like kids from different marginalized communities. One we haven't spoken as much about is the LGBTQ community. Especially when we're talking about, when we're looking over the last couple of years, you know, in light of new leadership and things like that, we see that our self-harm, our suicide, our unhoused community is largely LGBTQ kids that are in the school system, and that's not something that's really talked about or encouraged to talk about. So that's always a place that I like to kind of uplift, and this month we're heavily focused on prevention with suicide and things of that nature. So there'll be a lot of things coming out, and I just want to like throw out there that I like to do an outreach page for Sakota House. So if you have something that you want in the community, I'm all about it. Even if it's like sharing like, you know, a policy. Hey, how do we get around this? Because if we're questioning these things as professionals, our community is questioning the exact same thing. So even if it's not an event, but if it's like something you like want to, a contact that you're looking for or whatever, like please reach out to me. You know, I'll like throw it out there.
Well, on my agenda right now, it's funny that we had this conversation that I didn't expect because, like I said, when I ambushed the superintendent, I really, really believe that we have to have a long-range shift in volunteerism and community impact in the schools. So that's one. Number two is pre-K.
Yes.
It is absolutely the thing that will bring up our kids' scores and reduce the number of IEPs necessary, increase graduation rates, increase the social emotional learning that they learn in pre-K, helps them to reduce behavior issues in the school, frees up educators' time and energy. I mean, there's just so much that pre-K is so important, so I'm beating that drum very much. But the way that we've talked about this strata and how to integrate the nexus of this strata, I want the community start thinking about what is the strata that we can identify that get us to Raleigh. Because our state government is not representing us. And so who are we? Who are we being in a community that gets our voice all the way to Raleigh? And that is something that we need to develop and think a lot more about, because, you know, when we talk about the agendas, when we talk about the choices that are being made and whether or not they serve us, so much of that comes from Raleigh, even to the extent that our Wilmington government, our county government can't do what they want to do because Raleigh is pushing down. So that's my next thing.
Okay, thank you.
My next thing, last year I held my first annual Black Mental Health Symposium, and so
When is that?
it will be in May,
Okay.
May 30th.
Awesome.
So it was a really good turnout last year, and you guys please do come.
We're gonna show up.
everyone.
We're gonna pull up now. We
Yes.
Courthouse coming in the house.
Whoever wants to be on the panel, the theme is like family matters, community matters.
Okay.
And so this is perfect. And so the idea and the point of it is that I always hear we're the Black therapists in the community, and they're there. But again, we have a lot to work through, and we can't. One of my favorite clinical psychologists is called Carl Rogers. He says that, and I'm gonna butcher this, but you'll get it. He basically says that change can't occur until you know who you are.
Yes.
We don't know who we are, and that's intentional. And we have to intentionally go find out who we are, what has happened to us, and then move forward. And so your future thinking is great to me, and I'm still here. It doesn't keep us stuck, but we have to figure out where this ambivalence lies, that we are here and we want to go there, and what's this ambivalence? And so his thing is ambivalence. What is in this ambivalence that we're staying stuck? And so we have to look back, and then we get here, why are we still stuck? And we got to move forward. So May 31st at Mount, not Massillon, good gracious. I'll send a flyer.
Get it to Angie. She'll put a nice little message out there for you and circulate it for you.
Yeah, make sure
Yes,
all of
awesome.
your events are like,
For sure.
And then every year I just had my 3rd annual silent retreat. So don't be afraid of silence. It was amazing. And people are like, do it again. So I would love to host one here.
That'd be
It doesn't
excellent.
have to
That'd be
be my annual one. It could be whenever.
Man,
Yes.
doors open. Reach out. Let us know.
Yes.
We make it happen. Let's make it happen.
Sign us up.
So I just do random things. So
We do too.
Yes, I love it.
What I call shower thoughts, whatever
Yeah.
pops in our head at that time.
Yes.
I'm doing
We
it.
got about 7 different people doing random things, so come
That's
join the
my
party.
people. I'm here.
It's not chaos.
It's not
And once you study what chaos really means, it's just we don't necessarily see the organization in it.
Yes, yes.
Right? It's brilliant.
Yes,
like
it's
an
an
artist
agenda.
gonna throw it on the wall and see what sticks.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes, for sure.
So,
So I appreciate it.
no, thank you guys. You guys are awesome. Everybody,
Yes.
please give them a hand. Thank you.